Daniel whispered. No, this can't be real, as his trembling fingers scrolled through the leaked email chain, each subject line etched with his name like a scarlet mark. His badge, once a pass to purpose, now beeped red at the office turnstile, shutting him out like an intruder in his own world. The security guard glanced away, silent, complicit, letting the alarm scream unanswered in Daniel's chest. His heart pounded louder than the scanner's rejection tone, louder than the whispers curling behind glass walls. Every screen in his mind flashed betrayal, every breath thickened with dread. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting his reflection in the lobby glass, hollow-eyed, cornered, already condemned. He thought of his daughter's voice that morning, asking why he looked so tired, and guilt gnawed deeper than fear. They know, he muttered under his breath, clutching his phone tighter, the device buzzing with unread threats masked as reminders. The collapse had begun. Daniel sat on the lobby's cold steel bench, the buzzing phone digging into his palm like a weapon turned inward. His pulse raced faster than the traffic outside, but no one met his eyes. The receptionist typed noisily, ignoring his presence as though he were already erased. The glass walls turned into a cage, each reflection showing fragments of his unraveling. He remembered Sarah's morning hug, her small arms anchoring him, and shame twisted his gut. I just need answers, he whispered, though no one heard. His badge dangled uselessly, a symbol of trust revoked, while his thoughts spiraled into every worst possibility. The storm outside thundered, as if mocking his silence. The receptionist cleared her throat sharply, her eyes glued to the glowing monitor, pretending Daniel wasn't there. He shifted, voice cracking as he asked, "Is my badge deactivated?" Silence pressed harder than any reply. Her shoulders stiffened, and that silence told him more than words. He could feel the building itself rejecting him, the very air colder, walls leaning closer. Betrayal tasted metallic, heavy on his tongue. He remembered late nights, fixing errors that weren't his, promises whispered in meetings that loyalty would be rewarded. Instead, here he was, invisible in plain sight, stripped of belonging. Daniel's phone buzzed again, another anonymous number flashing across the screen. His chest tightened as he opened the message. "We warned you to stop." The words glared brighter than any neon sign, slicing through his resolve. He swallowed, throat dry, as fear coiled like a living thing in his gut. His gaze darted around the empty lobby, searching for witnesses, allies, anyone who might stand with him. Instead, only shadows lingered, watching silently. He thought of Sarah's school tuition, of bills stacked at home, and the choice between truth and survival pressed sharper than ever. The thunder outside cracked like a verdict, rattling the glass as Daniel rose slowly, every muscle stiff with dread. His badge slipped from his fingers, clattering against the bench, a sound that echoed like finality. He whispered, "It's starting," the words trembling from lips that had carried too many secrets for too long. Every step toward the exit door felt heavier, dragging chains invisible yet crushing. He pressed his palm against the glass once more, staring into the storm's chaos, his reflection fractured, unrecognizable. He had become the outsider, the enemy, the marked man. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, head buried in his hands, while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. His wife Emily asked softly, "What happened today?" But her eyes already knew the answer. He looked up, exhausted, and forced a smile that cracked like glass under pressure. The weight of Sarah's laughter from her bedroom echoed, innocence untouched by the storm brewing around them. "It's nothing," Daniel muttered, though the words were hollow. Emily leaned closer, voice shaking. "You can't keep carrying this alone." He wanted to tell her everything, every threat, every betrayal, but fear gripped him like chains. The aroma of dinner turned sour in the air, blending with tension too thick to swallow. Daniel traced the rim of his empty glass, his voice low and hoarse. "They've marked me." Emily's breath caught as she whispered, "What does that mean?" He shook his head, staring at the floor tiles, as though they might reveal an escape. He remembered Sarah's drawings on the fridge, each one a reminder of the life he was trying to protect. His chest tightened, guilt spreading like fire, because he knew every step toward truth dragged danger closer to his family. Emily reached for his hand, but he pulled away, ashamed of the fear she could see in his eyes. The silence that followed was sharper than any accusation. Sarah bounded into the kitchen, carrying a crayon-streaked page. "Daddy, look," she said with a smile that pierced Daniel's armor. He forced a grin, his voice breaking as he replied, "It's beautiful." Emily's eyes softened briefly at the moment, but fear quickly returned to her features. Sarah skipped away, unaware of the storm that threatened her safe little world. Daniel exhaled, whispering to himself, "She deserves better than this." His heart ached with the knowledge that truth might protect strangers but destroy his family. Paper in his hands trembled, the colors smudging beneath his sweating fingers. Emily said, "If you fight them, they'll bury us." Her voice cracked, half pleading, half warning. Daniel clenched the paper tighter, feeling the weight of his daughter's innocence pressed into its colors. "If I stay silent, I bury myself," he answered, his tone hollow but firm. Emily turned away, wiping a tear, her silhouette fractured by the dim kitchen light. The distance between them felt like miles, though only a table separated them. Daniel's gaze lingered on the window, rain tapping softly against the glass, reminding him that storms were not only outside. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken fears. Daniel lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced like silent accusers. His badge sat discarded on the table, its plastic surface gleaming under the lamp. Emily curled in bed upstairs, holding Sarah close as though shielding her from the world. Daniel whispered, "I can't protect them by running," the words barely audible, more confession than resolve. His chest rose with shallow breaths, the weight of choices pressing down like lead. The storm outside finally faded, but inside, the war was only beginning. Daniel entered the office, the air colder than he remembered, every step echoing like trespass. His coworkers looked up briefly, then lowered their eyes, retreating into silence sharper than words. Karen, once his ally, avoided his glance, her face lit by the glow of her monitor, as if the screen itself was safer than meeting his eyes. Daniel cleared his throat, muttering, "Morning," but the greeting fell into the void, unanswered. He felt the walls tighten, the hum of machines blending with whispers just loud enough to sting. His desk, once cluttered with shared jokes and coffee cups, now felt like a quarantined island. Daniel sat at his desk, opening a file only to find pages missing, replaced with a note in bold, "Stop digging." His chest tightened, and he glanced around, but every head remained bent, as though the room had agreed on silence. He whispered, "They're erasing everything," to himself. The words caught in the dry air. He remembered late nights documenting evidence, the endless spreadsheets that now seemed swallowed by a black hole. The absence of proof was louder than its presence, a warning that his truth was being rewritten before his eyes. At lunch, Daniel carried his tray into the break room, but conversations died as he entered. A group at the far table laughed nervously, their voices rising artificially, as though to mask guilt. He chose a corner seat, the silence pressing against his ears like static. He stabbed at his food, appetite gone, muttering, "I'm already a ghost here." He remembered when this room was filled with jokes and chatter. Now, every sound felt rehearsed. His reflection in the vending machine glass looked older, worn, as though years had passed in weeks. Later that night, Daniel worked alone, the office nearly dark except for the pale glow of his monitor. He uncovered a spreadsheet with mismatched numbers, lines that screamed fraud hidden beneath layers of corporate polish. His pulse raced as he whispered, "This is it," but fear coiled instantly, knowing discovery meant danger. Every creak of the empty floor sounded like footsteps, every flicker of light a shadow of pursuit. His fingers hovered over the save key, torn between safety and evidence, truth and survival. Daniel packed his bag slowly, every sound amplified in the empty office. He froze when he saw a shadow move across the glass wall, followed by muffled footsteps fading into silence. His breath quickened, palms slick, as he whispered, "They're watching me." The thought rooted itself deeper than any evidence he had found. As he left the office, the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside him, rain hammering the windows like fists demanding surrender. He gripped his bag tighter, but the weight felt more like a burden than protection. Daniel sat across from Karen in a quiet cafe, desperate for one voice he could still trust. She leaned forward, lowering her tone. "You need to stop before it's too late." He searched her face, looking for the warmth that once made her an ally, but found only shadows in her eyes. He whispered, "I thought you believed me," but her gaze slid away, fixed on the untouched coffee cup. The silence spoke louder than her words, a warning wrapped in fear. Daniel's chest sank with the realization that even here, outside the walls of the office, the betrayal had already begun. Back at the office, Daniel found a confidential report left on his desk, one he had never seen before. The data inside confirmed fraud, but a chill ran through him. The final page bore his signature, forged. He muttered, "No, this isn't mine." His stomach turned, realizing the trap was set. They hadn't just erased his evidence, they had rewritten it to condemn him. Around him, the office buzzed faintly, but every glance felt like a silent verdict already delivered. Karen appeared at his desk, her voice soft but trembling. "Daniel, you should drop this. It's bigger than us." He looked up, eyes narrowing. "You knew." She flinched, biting her lip, but said nothing. The betrayal cut deeper than the threat itself, sharper than any forged document. Daniel whispered, "You were supposed to stand with me," but her silence was confirmation. She turned away, shoulders rigid, walking back into the maze of cubicles as if distance could erase her guilt. Daniel's fists clenched, his trust shattered beyond repair. Daniel stood in the corridor, heart hammering, as whispers trailed from behind the glass conference room. Through the tinted glass he saw Karen seated beside executives, her expression tense but complicit. A manager pointed at a file with his name highlighted in red. Daniel's pulse throbbed in his ears, louder than the muffled voices. He whispered, "They've already decided." The corridor stretched endlessly, a gauntlet of shadows pressing him into the corner of betrayal. That night, Daniel sat alone in his car, rain pounding on the windshield. The city lights fractured into blurred streaks. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he whispered, "Even Karen." The betrayal replayed in his mind, a loop that crushed hope with every pass. The truth he held was no longer just evidence. It was a curse, twisting allies into enemies, trust into poison. He leaned back, chest heaving, as the storm outside mirrored the storm within, each drop like a reminder that he was now utterly alone. The courtroom's air was heavy, every cough and shuffle echoing like thunder. Daniel sat at the witness stand, his palms damp against the wood. The company's lawyer leaned in, voice smooth as a blade. "Did you fabricate these claims?" Daniel's throat tightened, his voice breaking. "No, I told the truth." He scanned the room, searching for a friendly face, but found only eyes hungry for spectacle. His chest burned, the weight of silence pressing harder than accusation. He knew the moment his words left his lips, there would be no turning back. Daniel's heart sank as Karen stepped into the witness box. She avoided his eyes, her voice steady but hollow. Daniel exaggerated the issues, she said, each word like a blade carving his trust into nothing. He whispered under his breath, "Karen." The judge nodded gravely as though truth had just shifted sides. Daniel gripped the edge of his seat, nails digging into the wood, each syllable she spoke pulling him further into the abyss. The betrayal was complete, delivered under oath, dressed in false loyalty. The corporate lawyer placed a forged document on the table, Daniel's signature glaring in ink. "Is this yours?" he asked coldly. Daniel's breath caught, his voice trembling. "That's not my signature." Laughter rippled faintly from the audience, mocking his defense. His pulse raced, his body trembling under the gaze of strangers who already judged him guilty. He thought of Sarah's drawing in his pocket, a reminder of why he endured. But the paper in front of him threatened to erase everything he had fought for. Daniel's lawyer finally rose, voice firm, "Ladies and gentlemen, truth is not erased by intimidation." She held up a copy of mismatched numbers Daniel had uncovered, the room shifting as evidence pierced through lies. Daniel exhaled, shoulders trembling, relief mixing with dread. The corporate table stiffened, executives whispering furiously behind their masks of control. The tension was electric, a storm breaking loose in the quiet courtroom. Daniel's eyes closed briefly, a flicker of strength sparking through exhaustion. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing like a gunshot through the chamber. Daniel's breath caught, his fate hanging in the silence that followed. He whispered to himself, "It's done," though whether in victory or defeat, he could not yet tell. His gaze lifted to the gallery where faces blurred between pity and disdain. Somewhere in the crowd, a journalist scribbled furiously, capturing history in ink. Daniel gripped the rail of the witness stand, every nerve alight, knowing he had given everything. The truth was out, but the cost was written across his very bones. The courthouse emptied slowly, footsteps fading like echoes of judgment that refused to die. Daniel stood in the hallway, his suit wrinkled, his face hollow, gripping the rail as though it anchored him to reality. Emily appeared at the end of the corridor, her eyes red from crying, Sarah clinging to her hand, looking up with innocent confusion. He forced a smile, whispering, "It's over," but his voice cracked, betraying the cost behind the words. Emily embraced him tightly, her trembling body pressed against his, but she whispered, "Even if the truth wins, we've already lost pieces we can't get back." Daniel closed his eyes, inhaling the faint scent of her hair, remembering what home felt like before this storm. Sarah tugged his sleeve, saying softly, "Daddy, can we go home now?" He nodded, but the weight in his chest reminded him that home was no longer what it used to be. That evening, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the once comforting hum of the refrigerator now a reminder of nights filled with silent dread. Emily placed a plate in front of him, untouched as his thoughts consumed him. Sarah chattered about her drawings, her voice light, unaware of the shadows lingering over her parents. Daniel tried to smile, nodding at her words, but each laugh from her lips twisted into guilt. He whispered under his breath, "She doesn't deserve this life," though Emily heard him, and placed her hand gently on his arm. Her voice broke, "We'll survive, Daniel, but we're not the same anymore." He met her eyes, and in them he saw both resilience and despair, woven together like threads of a torn fabric they could not repair. Daniel stepped outside into the night air. The storm finally passed, leaving streets slick and shimmering under the glow of streetlights. He leaned against the porch railing, staring into the quiet darkness, whispering, "They took everything, but not my voice." The weight of the trial lingered in his bones, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Emily joined him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, her silence saying more than words. She leaned her head against his arm, both of them staring at the horizon, as though searching for a future that no longer looked the same. Daniel clenched his fists, torn between relief and grief, knowing the truth was out there, but wondering if anyone would care tomorrow. The next morning, newspapers carried the headline, but Daniel's name was buried in fine print, overshadowed by the corporation's carefully crafted statement. He sat at the table, scanning the page, his face pale with the realization that victory was diluted into silence. Emily poured coffee, her voice flat, "They'll spin it however they want." Sarah ran through the living room, clutching her backpack, laughing at cartoons on the television, her innocence a stark contrast to the weight crushing her parents. Daniel whispered, "I gave them the truth," but his voice trembled, and the world shrugged. He folded the paper with shaking hands, the ink staining his fingers like a brand he could never wash off. Daniel walked alone through the park that evening, autumn leaves crunching under his shoes, the world continuing as though nothing had happened. He passed families laughing, joggers moving freely, strangers living lives untouched by his sacrifice. His chest ached as he thought, "I burned everything for truth. And still, life goes on without pause." Sitting on a bench, he pulled Sarah's crayon drawing from his pocket, the paper worn at the edges, colors faded, but still bright enough to remind him why he chose this path. He whispered, "Maybe she'll understand someday," his eyes wet with both pride and grief. The wind rustled the trees above, carrying his words into the fading light, a reminder that some battles leave scars long after the war is over. Daniel sat at his desk in the dimly lit living room, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across his tired face. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He scrolled through online headlines, his name barely mentioned, buried under the corporation's polished statements. His chest tightened as he read words that twisted truth into fiction, painting him as unstable and reckless. Emily appeared in the doorway, her robe wrapped tightly, whispering, "Come to bed," her voice gentle but heavy with sorrow. He nodded but didn't move, whispering back, "I need them to know what really happened." The words felt futile, even as they left his lips. His hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen between the urge to write and the exhaustion of a war already lost. The phone rang suddenly, shattering the silence. Daniel froze, staring at the screen as an unknown number flashed, its glow cutting through the darkness like a blade. Emily stepped closer, whispering, "Don't answer," but his hand trembled as he picked it up. A voice on the other end was low, calculated, "You should have stayed quiet." His breath caught, his heart pounding against his ribs. Emily's face paled, tears filling her eyes as she mouthed, "Please stop." Daniel ended the call without replying, his body trembling as though he had been struck. He set the phone down slowly, the silence afterward deafening, each second stretching into eternity. The next morning, Daniel walked Sarah to school, the crisp autumn air biting against his skin. She skipped ahead, her laughter echoing in the quiet street, her backpack bouncing with each step. He smiled faintly, though his chest ached, whispering to himself, "This is why I did it." Emily trailed behind, watching both of them with a mixture of pride and fear. At the school gate, Sarah turned, hugging Daniel tightly. "Bye, Daddy," she said, her innocence shielding her from the storm that had consumed their lives. He knelt, clutching her close, whispering, "Be brave, my little one." As she ran inside, he stood frozen, the weight of both hope and despair pressing down. That evening, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table, the crayon drawing Sarah had given him spread before him. He traced the colors with trembling fingers, the paper worn and creased, yet still alive with innocence. Emily stood at the sink, her back to him, her silence heavy and unbroken. He whispered, "They can erase my name, twist the story, but they can't take this from me." His voice shook as tears slid down his face, the kind of tears that burn because they carry both grief and pride. Emily finally turned, her eyes wet, whispering, "Then hold on to that, Daniel." He nodded faintly, clutching the drawing like a lifeline, his soul tethered to the one thing that still felt pure. Daniel sat on the porch as night fell, the world around him quiet, the air sharp with the chill of autumn. The phone lay on the table beside him, silent now, but heavy with the memory of threats that refused to fade. He leaned back, staring at the stars barely visible through city haze, whispering, "It was worth it," his voice steady despite the cracks in his spirit. Emily stepped into the doorway, watching him with eyes that carried both sorrow and pride. He turned briefly, offering a faint smile, before looking back into the darkness. The silence stretched, heavy and final, the kind that lingers long after words disappear. The story had ended, but the echoes of betrayal and courage would never leave him.